David Plouffe, former Obama '08 campaign manager, advisor to the Harris campaign, on which, you may recall, I worked, wrote an op-ed in the New York Times, "The old way of campaigning won't cut it anymore," featuring this line at the top: "Successful campaign in 2026 must operate like a full-time production studio." The internet reacted totally normally to this.
Yes.
With a couple of different strains. Matt Gorman, a Republican strategist, says he's right. Too often candidates initially pretend they can be selective, then once they're in sixth place are everywhere. His suggestion being candidates need to be doing more digital content all day, every day, even when they're winning. And then Emily Frank, a lot of people are going to mistake this for meaning your candidate has to become an influencer rather than one who's charismatic, consistent on message, and relevant to their audience, which is what winning politicians have always had to be. Plenty of discourse, but I generally find this persuasive that, okay, yeah, it's about tactics, but at the end of the day, if the candidate is good, they'll rise to the top.
I think about Zoran Mamdani a lot. Part of what was so good about his campaign is that he is native to the internet. He was doing a bunch of stuff, going around doing man on the street videos, and everything he did felt like totally authentic to him. And that's partly because he's 33 years old and grew up on this. And I don't think it's going to play well if like Roy Cooper and Janet Mills and like Ed Markey are like running around trying to be influencers. So,
but what do you make? Okay, but what do you make of like Bernie, who is not digital native but does a lot of content? Like,
yes, but I think Bernie does a good job of doing stuff that feels authentic to him. Like, he's not trying to do Zoran Mamdani videos. He's always been, I'm the cantankerous old guy that exclusively cares about wealth inequality, and everything he does plays into that. So he's, I will now interview Claude.
That was good.
Thank you. I mean, I've listened to a lot. I've spent the last 10 years of my life just listening to him and Donald Trump and like screaming into my pillow. I just think that it has to be authentic to and tailored to the individual candidate.
Yes.
And if a bunch of like stiff septuagenarians read this and are, all right, now I will implement the bluff plan Barack Obama, like, it's not going to go well.
The person whose name is on the door has to be involved. And this is the baseline problem, which is that in so many campaigns and so many offices, the way it works is the digital person is ideas get filtered through a committee that then gets handed to the principal after a bunch of internal litigation.
Yes.
And so the net effect is you're handing a 70-year-old person who's never used the internet before a script that's been litigated by committee. And then you wonder why the product is not good. Danielle Butterfield, who runs Priorities, tweeting, 1, the staff structure to support this type of campaign must change. The playbook can be different based on each candidate's strength. Our research from last fall showed voters weren't necessarily drawn to Mamdani's policies, but the way he told other people's stories. And Shelby Cole, who's the CMO at the DNC, saying, my take, campaigns in 2027 must elevate their digital strategies, not layer them with comm staff. These are categorically two different functions and must be treated as such. And then Jeremy Slevin said, agree with most of this, but would argue that digital and comms are not different functions. Digital strategy is the central work of communications now. Gone are the days of pitching reporters and drafting statements.
I don't understand how comms and digital could be like totally cleaved and like two separate functions. You need to have one consistent brand and stand for consistent things. And you can't just have like a super fun TikTok account that's run by super smart 24-year-old staffers and then like a candidate who talks in a totally different way about totally different things and has a different pitch.
I agree that the place that we want to be is that digital is integrated well into organizational structures. I think there is a foundational problem, though, which is that in practice, when you do that, there ends up being nobody advocating for using the internet at the highest levels of the campaign. That manifests problems in a bunch of different ways. So normally you keep digital together because they can sort of amortize their authority from the fundraising side, where grassroots fundraising tends to drive most of the fundraising, to then push for sort of better thinking when it comes to what you do through communications. The net effect is someone who's a comms person who is thinking in traditional press releases and sort of has to be convinced of digital is the person whose job it is to advocate for digital. A person who is a traditional fundraiser who's thinking just about money in and not how you treat your supporters is the person advocating. And you sort of in this place where the fox is kind of guarding the hen house.
I also think that it needs to trickle down to the staff level, because I can't read another, like, I keep reading these stories where it's a bad thing about Republicans and then like a quote from the DSCC or the DCCC or whatever, where they're this proves that Republicans are panicked about. I'm like, why are we still doing this? What is the value of like doing these super fucking anachronistic statements that are like straight out of the 80s?
I would say this: digital moves at the speed of marketing, comms moves at the speed of the news. And like, you have to be thinking about, what is the campaign actually about? That's what Zoran, to Danielle's point earlier, gets right. Which is, he had a brand and he stuck to the brand and he was about the brand every single day. Well, didn't come without dunks on digital. Amar Musa, who is press secretary for Wes Moore, said a lot of Dem digital strategists live by impressions and want to convince you that's how we win. And then a little shot at old Bobby Content here. I sat there and pitched dozens of stories about how Kamala HQ was winning the internet. We didn't, famously. And so this is a thing that I have seen sort of pop up in versions of the discussion, which is that the average Democratic digital strategist is only focused on how do we just go viral and not why are we going viral. It's a complicated thing because I do think that reach is an important thing. Getting attention is an important thing. You need to have a theory of attention in order to win. Yes. I do think sometimes you do end up in this place where people are just trying to sort of maximize virality without sort of checking out the brand. And I don't necessarily know that that's true of digital people, by the way. I think it's true of everybody who's extremely online who is like trying to win the Twitter dunk of the day. Now, if I may stand in defense of Kamala HQ, there was actually like a really particular reason why we were doing that sort of voice, which was twofold. One, we came out of this period where it was really uncool to support the Democratic campaign because there was not a lot of enthusiasm behind Joe Biden. We needed to create enthusiasm. We needed to create a sense that the campaign was cool. We needed to consolidate the base, right? I mean, that was the other problem, is that the voters who we lost because of were disaffected Dem voters who were starting to come home. And so Kamala HQ gave us a way to speak on social media in a way that sort of wasn't in the candidate's specific voice.
Well, and it's also like, not to roast Kamala, but at the end of the day, it's like, they were, all right, now you've captured our attention. We want to know who you are. And she was, I'll never tell you.
Look, I think that it doesn't give Harris enough credit, I think, for what was a very challenging set of circumstances. And also, might I add, going back to Pluff's point, I think if you actually look at the way the campaign sort of operated down the stretch, it looked a lot like the thing Pluff said in the first paragraph, which was lots of events, lots of speeches, lots of doing it the traditional way. And my general theory is the campaign was winning in these periods where there was an attentional event each week, right?
Yes.
So you had, she goes out, you have Tim Walz, you have convention, you have debate, those four things. And then from there, we're in an open cage match with Donald Trump on attention, which is a space where he is the greatest of all time. Well, there were more theories about campaign structure. Steph Feldman, who she and I have had some disagreements about the value of digital on the internet, had this structure, which is there need to be 2 deputy campaign managers, a deputy campaign manager for votes and a deputy campaign manager for fundraising. What do you make of that?
I mean, campaign manager for votes, that's just the whole thing, right? The thing is 4 votes.
Okay, so here's what I'll say. To give Steph some credit here, I actually think there is something to this, which is I actually think you need to organize the campaign by who you're talking to. So you have elites and high information voters. So that's sort of press and honestly your own social media. So that's one vertical. Persuasion's a second vertical where it's people you need to move on an issue. And then mobilization is the people who are your supporters. What are you asking them to do, whether that's high dollar, low dollar, volunteering? I think those are like the thing. You organize the campaign around that. And you sort of do need to have sort of a deputy structure that hits all of those. So I'm not, here's the thing. For all of the whatever you think of this structure, I actually do think there is something about you need to kind of orient around who you're trying to talk to, not your specific functional.
If you have a theory of the case from the candidate, which is here's what I am all about and what I'm going to do for you, and like everything needs to flow downstream from that. And if you are compelling and people believe in you and think you're going to make their lives better, you can raise money.
I do think this from Matt Daly was pretty funny. This chart, which is has no idea what's going on, knows about half the plan, knows more than they're sharing across, and then is having a great time, is just along for the ride and is having a terrible time along the side. And so digital has no idea what's going on and is having a great time. Data knows more than they're sharing and is having a terrible time. Comms knows about half the plan and is having a terrible time. And you have research who knows more than they're sharing and is having a great time. I think this is pretty accurate.
It's not bad. I mean, I can definitely attest to having a terrible time.
Yeah.
I can tell you, if I was basically chained to a desk just screaming into the void. And then
I don't think anyone is having a great time on a campaign.
Well, I think that like
Unless you
if
win.
you're on Barack Obama 2008, you're probably having a better
An
time.
amazing time.
Than me like drinking whiskey under my desk and hoping that the next day doesn't come, which it always did.
Oh, man. But I do think this gets back to something that is pretty important, which is the obsession with tactical minutia, as Matt Iglesias wrote, How Digital Should Relate to Comms, podcast to go on, is itself the problem. We have a strategy problem. And I completely agree. Our glorious intern, nobody knows anything, running our social accounts. This entire thing sort of drove me nuts because at the end of the day, like what we do has like a marginal impact compared to, do people like the candidate? Does the candidate have a reason to exist? Do they have a theory of the case? Is it resonating? It's like,
I mean, speaking of org charts, this is a tough way for me to learn that we have an intern.
Yeah.
This is breaking news.
Unbelievable. It's not just us posting.
Incredible. When we had Barack Obama as our nominee, all of the operatives looked super smart.
Call in from Greg Cesar's office. The political science literature is clear. To save democracy, the Democratic Party must promote me and my friends and demote the people I find.
That was just such a good tweet.
Which is true. So much of this is just like, the problem with the Democratic Party is that I do not have more authority personally. No. Anyway, one last point that I thought was really interesting, and I do want to triple underscore that I do agree with from the Pluff piece, is many progressive donors are increasingly turning up their nose at writing checks to support advertising, yet to win tough races in tough places, we have to do it all. I think this is 100% happening right now, which is there's this thing after 2024 where organic internet was so much of the conversation that people are, well, what matters is podcasts and we're starting a podcast, so here we are. Physician, heal thyself.
You don't need advertising.
Yeah, you don't need advertising. Come on, nobody knows anything. Where we can talk to Marla, the best accountant in the world. But I do think there is some real truth to this, which is like advertising works, man. Like spending money to put content in front of people does work. The content needs to be good.
Right.
And that's, I think, most of our problem. Yeah. But like, this idea that like we're gonna viral our way to winning is also not true.
Totally, and like I do think that like one of the most underrated points, which is in my mind a massive testament to the team that you guys all had on the Biden turned Harris campaign, is that like she ran like significantly ahead of her national averages in swing states where we were running advertising and program and knocking doors and stuff like. It was like much closer in swing states, whereas like in places where we weren't doing anything, whether that was super red states or super blue states like Illinois that trended, and California that trended like heavily to the right, like she ran ahead of those national margins in swing states, and I think that was a testament to advertising and campaign tactics and whatnot. So good job.
Turns out
you knocked it out of the park, buddy.
Knocked it out of the park. Marginally improved, but didn't win is a T-shirt that I think we can get a medal
Can I ask you one more question about this piece?